All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Welcome to the Subspace Front-End App Sync. Today, we're going to be talking mainly about the first iteration of Subspace JS, the developer API that we're building that's going to allow anyone to store and retrieve data from the Subspace network easily. Leo's been working hard on this, and we're excited to see what the first version of this looks like. So Leo, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen and first to do an overview, I think, because I have been working in the library for one side and building a front end to test this. And let me share it. I think here it is. Share the screen. To shut down my camera a little. This was the issue that I created to point what I was working, and I am basically doing a put and a get method in this library to do these things regarding the user keys loading and signing the transaction, get a set of data to transform a bytes and expose the put method and the get method for the object submission. And it is working actually. I created a new branch where I got this first version that make these things in the description. And it's just had 3 files, one for create the identity loaded for for seed string, for pair actually from a keeper, and a couple of methods to get information about this identity. And it is linked to this client that implement the Polkadot API and the WebSocket provider to allow a connection to the farmer and to the node to do just 2 methods that put raw method that receive the data and send the transaction, and this get method to get an object information from an object ID. And it is working actually. I think that I got the demo working in here. So this front end basically it's connected to the node and to the farmer, and it loads your Polkadot extension accounts, so you can send a transaction from. I got the development accounts activated. We can disable that, but you can select this wallet from Polkadot.js, and for example, take a file, and a second step, you can submit the data with this account. You just sign the transaction with your wallet, and it will send the transaction to the backend, and it loads. It shows only the latest events regarding the storage API, and it's returned the object ID who signed the transaction and the transaction size. This is not formatted. I am working in having this in full TypeScript, and I think that that's what you got right now. And this get method is sometimes it doesn't work because it takes some times to get the next archival, the next archival process from the farmer. So when that's happened, you can get the object. So you have to wait a little sometimes to get the object itself. So when you get the object, I was trying to create in here a button to download as a file, just the same way you load it. And yeah, I think that's are my updates for now. I don't have this in GitHub because it's a new project. I will create a new project for this front end, I think. And I wanted to discuss that actually. And yeah, I think that's the updates for now. I don't know if you guys got any questions.
So that front end, it's not like standalone application that we will deploy, right?
Yeah, it's actually we
It's just an
can,
example how to use it.
yeah, it's just an example how to use this, how to use
So I
this,
think
and
it could be just a like examples folder under Subspace JS repository, and
yeah,
we don't probably need to put a lot of like work into make it super nice.
okay,
Just like a simple demo how to use it. Like the simpler it is, the better, because it will be used by other people like to copy paste and modify
yeah.
to do whatever they want.
I am actually working in that in have all implemented in just one file and have this easy way to just create an identity, connect to the client, and
Awesome.
and have it exposed just in one file. So we can just link that and you use this library this way.
Yeah, I agree. I think to Nazar's point, we don't want to spend any time making this demo pretty right now,
Yeah.
because we got to like this quick and dirty version 1. So we need to kind of like think about next steps a little bit more carefully here. But this is great that we have this. So yeah, this is wonderful. Very happy to see this. And also, I totally agree. We probably want to have an examples folder or something like that, and just lots of different examples within that, and this would just be one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like a nice example. I think some of the other examples we can just have zero CSS, just like simple tables, simple code, no frameworks, just so people can copy paste and then put into their frameworks, regardless of whatever framework they are using. Just like simple, concise one. And I think in terms of getting the object, like downloading the object, it might make sense, at least for some of the demos, to restrict files to images. And when you click get, it will like insert the image on the page so you can see it. Instead of like downloading it, and it will be obvious if the file is actually retrieved properly. Like if there is some problem, you will see broken image.
Yeah, that's a fast way to have it like working. Yeah. I will do that.
Let's think about the get for a second. So right now, if we get data, if we put data, how long on average does it take before that's archived by the farmer, Nazar, like on the current testnet?
It is 100 blocks, the depth, and after 100 blocks, if you don't have enough data to fill the buffer, it will obviously take a little bit more than that.
So that's 600 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 minutes fastest, plus
some extra.
Yeah.
If you are archiving the history, it's basically right after that. Otherwise, it will take a little bit more time.
Right. And what's the size on the segment? It's like 512K.
Yeah. It's 400 something because we add witness to it, I think.
Right. Okay. And each Kusama block right now is like
13 kilobytes, maybe 15 kilobytes, the latest ones.
with all the parachains as well, or just the Kusama block?
With all parachains, like the whole block.
The whole block.
Parachains themselves are like separate. They are also like, depending on parachain, are
right
10 kilobytes or something.
Okay, so that's like 10, so about 150 kilobytes. So not too long. So maybe 3 or 4 blocks.
Yeah,
so
on real chain it should be fine.
It shouldn't take too long. Okay, so we're looking at like 10 to 12 minutes, probably realistically, to get this data available. So would it make sense to have on the farmer some sort of like a cache of like objects which have been archived that have not, or objects which like pending archive objects, I guess, something like that. So that because like if you submit and then you're like, okay, wait 15 minutes and then get, that's kind of a weird user experience for like a developer, right? So I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could have something like where you click submit and you click get, and the farmer would recognize this as like a pending object, but it would still be able to return the object maybe with a different state of like not yet committed or something like that.
That would be really weird because that like defeats the whole purpose of the blockchain. Like you will get something which wasn't like verified properly, might be reverted and stuff like that.
Well, but it would have that like status. I mean, you would know that when it came over. Like there would be like some sort of a flag that would indicate that. But it at least would allow like these demos to be a lot more interesting, because it's like, imagine I'm giving a demo of this and I'm like, okay, we're putting, and then I have to talk for 15 minutes and then we get it back out and people are like, wow, this is incredibly slow. Like I would never use this.
Okay, but there is a workaround for that. Since our content is addressable by content ID, we can actually upload the image like 10 minutes before. When you upload it once again, it will upload properly, but the ID will be the same. So you can retrieve it right after.
Oh, I see. That's a can
Like
demo.
writing workarounds for demos, it's like really ugly.
It's not. I'm just using that as an example. It's just, that's the experience that I think. I just imagine like that's probably the first thing somebody's going to request, to be like, well, can I just get the data? Like I know it's going to be in there eventually, but I still just want to be able to retrieve it. Like even though I know it's in a pending state, you know. Because they believe it's going to get included, they just like don't want to have to wait to, you know, for their DApp to be able to retain it. I guess, I mean, it depends a lot on the use case.
Can implement cache on its side. Like it will not be retrievable by others, but they can cache it locally.
Okay, that's a longer discussion we need to have offline. But I think it's something that we need to consider. Okay. So Leo, can you walk us through the code? You did that pretty quickly. Can you walk us through the code of this, just a little bit more detail on what's like? I guess what I'd really like to see maybe is more, what is the developer experience? Like how does this API get employed? Is I guess what I care more about right now than what's under the hood. Maybe you could show us the demo app code, just the JavaScript part of it.
Sorry, it was me. In the front end, I think that we can just go to here.
You had Node.js application as well. Maybe that is simpler.
Yeah, I don't have it in here right now. Actually, I think that I removed it. But basically, you just have this Subspace client, and this is the way you load an identity. In this example, I am getting this from the Polkadot extension, so it's an injected account, and I use this account pair to create the state, to save it in the state and get it in here to instance this identity from pair, and I have the identity returned, and with this identity, I just use this Subspace client method to get it connected through a provider socket and to the farmer socket. And I passed this identity, and I just made this Subspace client dot set signer to set the signers of the transactions. And with that, you just have this working and connected. And after that, you can use the client to basically.
Sorry, just a second there, Leo. What's the difference between the identity and the signer?
The signer is the identity, but just what we are doing here is setting the API to send the transaction that with only this signer identity.
There is basically an interface in the Polkadot JS API, which expects certain methods to be available. And the signer is like a separate class, which basically allows you to sign things with that signer. In this case, you do not have key pair. You have just signer, which talks to the API of the extension and asks extension to sign something. That's why you have the pop-up.
But
It's
the
like
signer
abstract
is,
notion of a thing that can sign something.
but that signer is tied to that identity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so
like
that's
in the relayer, for instance, signer is actually implemented by the worker, which like is in a separate thread. But since we implement this API, we can substitute it instead of the default one.
okay. So in this case, I guess the way I'm looking at it, like, would there ever be a case where the identity would not be the signer?
Identity is not a signer. Signer is a thing which can use key pair or extension or something else. There are several ways how you can sign it.
But so what is an identity? It's a public-private key pair?
In this case, it's not a key pair because you don't have access to private keys from extension.
So it's a account.
Public key and probably some other information.
Okay, but that public key is one-to-one linked to the signing context.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is it feels like that's something which might exist. We might want to do under the hood versus having somebody explicitly do it here. I don't know if that's something we need to expose to the client. If they have an identity that they're already loading in, then it should just inject the signer or set the signer based on that identity versus having them explicitly do it, just to make this more simple.
But identity is not a signer. See, you can create identity from injected it's called account pair. That's weird. But it also can create it from URI from seed.
Yeah, and sometimes in terms of front end, you want to change your identity, so you can just call the new identity, and you will have to set the signer again.
Right, but
So
I mean, would you set an identity and then have a signer based on a different identity?
Okay, so the difficulty here is the API of the Polkadot.js API itself. So it has a separate parameter for signer, but there is also another thing which is like the author, basically, and those are for some reason separated. So in some cases, if you have a key pair, you just specify a key pair. If you have a key pair or like just a public key and a signer, then you need to specify them separately because signer doesn't contain the public key in itself. It's basically like an interface with one method. It doesn't have any properties. It doesn't have anything. Just a method sign, basically. So
Okay.
you might want to think how to abstract it away, but it's a little bit awkward on their side, I'm afraid.
Okay. I mean, I get that that's
create like a signer with a public key on their layer to make it more convenient.
Yeah. I mean, I get that's sort of an implementation detail of Polkadot.js, but it would be nice if we could abstract that away from our library, because it's not really a concept that we have. I mean, I don't imagine that we would have a different signer from the identity. I mean, those are kind of one-to-one in my mind.
Yeah, they should be.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. I'm just trying to understand. Thanks for explaining that. Okay,
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead, Leo.
And the next step is obviously to get the data and send just and call just one file. So if you already have the data, you just call your client and call this port raw method that returns you a promise with the object ID, actually. And yeah, I think that it's just that, because the next method is the get raw.
Sorry, so if you can go back to that to the put. So you're putting the data, and then you're awaiting a promise that returns, I guess OID is object ID.
Yeah.
We probably want to make these more explicit in examples so that like people reading this, like there's no question about what this is. Like explicit names are better. And then set object ID.
No, this is just a React. This is just a React method to set the
what is the old OID dot slice to?
You get the full object ID with the 0x, and you need I just do a slice to save it and just in the next step of the get row, you just have to send the object ID without the 0x, the hexadecimal way.
Okay, so that's just to make it prettier whenever you display it in the front end? Or do we actually need it in that format to retrieve it?
We need that in that format to retrieve it without the X. Yeah.
Okay, that seems a little bit awkward to have to like post-process it to retrieve it. It seems like
the
whatever.
library should do it.
Yeah, whatever output it's in should be the same. Like literally, it should return an object ID, and in that exact format, we should be able to retrieve it under that object ID.
Yeah, I will do that in the library.
And I think it will be simplified in the future when we switch to the content IDs that Protocol Labs invented, basically. They have like a way to encapsulate all of that information, so you can return one thing which can be like different, represent different kinds of objects, basically, to do a different strain. So either way, the API will not change because object ID will be exactly the same as you get from put. You will be able to use it in get without changes.
Noted. I will do that.
Yeah.
Change.
Yeah, that definitely, that'll be the next iteration of this. It'll be more like that. But don't worry about using anything from IPFS or whatever Protocol Labs content IDs right now. We're not at that level of sophistication yet. Sorry, why are we using underscore to prefix our client? Is that a convention?
No, this is just a workaround to the front end. I got everything in just one file, and when I create the client, I then have to make the client a state variable. So I created an underscore, but it's just a front end thing from React.
Okay. I think it would probably be better, like Nazar was saying, if our hello world example, like that's kind of what we're trying to get to, is like a hello world of Subspace JS, if it was independent of any framework, so that it was just like completely obvious to people. Like you wouldn't have to understand how React work or Vue.js or Angular or whatever framework we're using. It was just a very simple like HTML, CSS, like JavaScript style. So that's something we might want to
probably without CSS, like just
just
simple form piece of JavaScript. That's it.
Yeah. Or maybe even just something that's just pure JavaScript. Like maybe it doesn't even need to render. It's just like they can see the code and understand kind of how it works.
Sure. I thought that we wanted to expose this like in a similar way to the relayer.
We do eventually, but I mean, this is like relayer is like the graduate level of this, right? Because that has to support feeds, and we don't have feeds in here yet. This is just like, we have like a 5-year-old developer. We have somebody who's like brand new to JavaScript, and we want them to understand this. Like we're starting with like the most simple, like most basic use case here.
Yeah, sure. Actually, that will be nice, because I was like thinking in work in the front end today, and I had a lot of pending things, and I can just move this to a more basic thing. So
yeah,
I think it's still useful to have like
a
tricky thing, but we should also have like a simpler one as well.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. This is good. We're going to eventually need a React. We're probably going to want to have like a React template, a Vue template, and like an Angular. I don't know if people still use Angular, but a template like that. But I'm just saying, for now, like I don't want you to spend a lot of time making it pretty in React while we're still like refactoring what the core library is. Like that's the more important thing right now.
Yeah, sure. Actually, that way I can focus in having the library itself like more strictly taped, actually.
Great.
And well, just as a next step, you got this get method, and in the same way, you just call the get row and pass the object ID, and you get the full data in JSON, actually. And it's just that, and those two methods are the main use case.
Okay, so we get it out as JSON. Did we put it in as JSON as well?
We just put a one parameter, so it's just I think that U8 array bytes array, and we get the object ID as a JSON. So
Okay.
we send the object ID again in the same format,
Stage is
and
not
we get
JSON, it's
a
just a
JSON.
string.
Sorry?
Object ID is a string, not JSON.
No, that the
Yeah.
output.
No, the output is we got it in JSON.
Okay, so I think that's confusing as well, like because you have raw data input, but you actually have like raw data as object as output here. So they're not strictly like symmetric.
Yeah, they should be symmetric, really.
I mean, I think we want to get an object out. Maybe it's like raw data object and it's like raw data object dot file, or I don't know, binary or something like that. I mean, I think an object is like cleaner to work with than just getting the raw data. And so I agree, but we need to be very clear about our names here of what we're getting out. I don't. What do you think, Nazar?
I think if you have put that takes bytes and returns a string as an object ID, you should be able to take that string, call put, call get, and get the same bytes back. Like no objects added, no like exactly. If you put it, you get it. If you get object ID, you should be able to use it right away to get something. It should be like fully symmetrical. You should be able to like get put in the cycle, and everything should be exactly the same all the time.
So the get will just return the data itself. Right?
Yeah, the bytes, same bytes that you just placed it.
Well, let's think about that. I mean, does that make sense, or do we want to have like, because then we have like a put raw and a get raw. Does that mean that we would eventually have like a more like cleaner like put and get method that would return an object, and then that like get method might have like a to raw like method on top of it that would expose it like in this way, or do we want to have like two separate methods to get it out, like as raw or as an object?
I think eventually we will do something like, again, multi-codec from protocol labs, where every piece of data is prefixed by the type of that data. So when we get it, we will know if this is like a raw bytes, if this is a file, or is this a JSON object, or is this just a string that someone typed, and we will be able to return that accordingly. But right now, like the simple use case, if you have JSON, you can just use text encode in the browser or Node.js to turn it into bytes and back. It's really not a big deal. And you can have like a simple example which does that. It's like 3 lines of code.
Okay.
But if you don't do that with the text version, like in JSON, it will be like very awkward to upload like a small image. You'll have to like use base64 or something. It will not be a great experience.
Yeah, and you know, we did developer surveys back on this when we were doing Subspace, the older version of Subspace GS, and we got a lot like people that were backend engineers, like protocol engineers. They wanted it all in binary. All the front end developers, like they were like, I don't know how to deal with raw bytes. I'm confused. I don't want to mess with this anymore. Like, please go away. Take this away from me. And they wanted everything as an object. So we really have to think carefully about our audience here versus like the way that we would do things internally.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, but binary still can be useful for Node.js developers, right?
Yeah, that's what Jeremiah is saying. Backend developers were more familiar like with buffers in Node.js and stuff. And front-end developers, just give me JSON.
I have a question on this. Do we have a way to track the status of the object? Because we need to wait for like 10-15 minutes, right? And it will be nice on the front end if we can show like what is how much left to wait.
Yeah. So actually, yes, that again goes against the simplicity of the API. Like we need to return most stuff. Like we can return the object ID, which we know right away, but there is also transaction ID. So if you know transaction ID, then we can know in which block it was included. We know how far that block is from the head of the chain, and we can know like what is the key depth. Again, we can query it from the state of the chain, and we can see like when it escapes the window and starts being archived. So we can show like a progress bar, like 99 blocks left, 90 blocks left, 10 blocks left, and now it's about to be archived, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think can be useful for the demo purposes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we discussed at the offsite, and that, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. So we have like a million things we want to do with this API. But what we really wanted to do here, and kind of what Leo's guidance was just to go with this extremely simple beginner API. And what we want to do is, like, we have all these great ideas about how we want to do this, but like, you know, like in the Army, we said like no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and in my opinion, like no developer API survives first contact with like the developers that you want to show it to. So like what I wanted to do was just get something super dirty quick and go show it to other developers and get their feedback, and then iterate on that along with what we think we should do next, versus like trying to design the perfect API from scratch.
Yeah, in my head, this get raw was like more like low-level API. There should be like just put and get, which will be able to figure out what did you ask it to do and return you accordingly. So if you put a file, it will return you a file. If you put a JSON object, it will return you back a JSON object. Should be able somehow infer that internally. Doesn't really matter to user how exactly it happens.
Do I know what happened to Leo? Guess he lost his internet.
Yeah, he dropped off.
Okay. I guess we'll just give him a minute here. Okay. So Nazar, let's just discuss this really quick while we're waiting on Leo. So we have the basic API, we have the put, we have the get. I think Leo's got some guidance on a few things he needs to fix to make it a little bit prettier and more symmetric, or cleaner rather. From my point of view, some of the next steps I think would be important would be some documentation. So two things. One would be the actual API, like the function signatures, like in some documentation of like how to like connect, put, and get, and like what are the signatures of this, and then probably like a README that explains like a very simple hello world and like what this actually is, like so that we could, like, the idea would be to give it to somebody who had no idea what Subspace is, but just knew that it was like a very kind of abstract database API and was like a JavaScript developer, and show it to them and see how they understood it. So it should be like a explain it like I'm 5 kind of intro. I think those would be the important next steps, and then maybe working on some more simple examples that are like, you know, just JavaScript or just JavaScript and HTML.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to have at least 2 examples, one for the front end, one for the Node.js. Because on Node.js, you don't have to deal with extension, you can just use a seed, which might be like shorter, more concise example, easier to understand.
Yeah, that's actually, that was one thing I was a little bit confused on, is like, is that strictly necessary, like right now, the way it's designed, or is that just like one way to get the data in? And I think that some documentation would help kind of explain like what are the minimum steps you need to like set this up to put data in.
Sorry guys, internet gone and I have to connect to my cell phone. Sorry.
No worries. Glad we got you back. We were just discussing some things.
Any important thing to note, actually?
Well, let's see. I just want to make sure we finished everything. So we got through the get method. I don't think there was anything left to show. Leo, was there, on what the developer experience looks like?
Yeah, I think that's all the 4 things, the 4 steps. Get the identity, connect to the node, and put an object, and get the object.
Okay, cool. Yeah, from my point of view, this is great as a first step. This is wonderful. We got it done quickly, and it's simple. I think we gave you a little bit of feedback on like the actual the get method should return the exact same object ID as what the put method, or sorry, the put method should return the exact same object ID as what the get method expects, and the get method should return the exact same object or data, raw data, as was put into the put method, right? We want it to be fully symmetrical at this point.
Yep.
Okay, and then we also want to have this structure where we have an examples folder, and we would like to start, I think, so Nazar and I were just discussing probably 2 examples. One, which is like 2 hello world examples, basically. One, which is JavaScript front end, but vanilla JavaScript and HTML. That's it. Okay, no CSS, no JavaScript framework. And then another, which is a vanilla Node.js backend hello world, which would just create the identity from a seed, as opposed to having to use like the Polkadot.js extension.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Leo already showed me that Node.js he had it.
Yeah, I have to restore it.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
It's already working. Was the first step, I think.
Great. And then the other thing is going to be documentation. So there's really 2 parts of the documentation. So there's the actual API documentation, which shows like the public methods like connect, put, get, and like define like a sentence defining the method, and then what's the function signature, and like how does it work? Kind of like very simple documentation there, and then like a README that explains like at a very high level that this is a data, like basically this is an object store, like a distributed object storage API, and this is what you need to do. Like step 1, you need to do this. Step 2, you need to do this. So like very abstract documentation. Okay, the first thing you need to do is create an identity. This is how you create an identity. The second thing you need to do is put data to the network. Well, this is the kind of data you can put on the network. And like, here's like a code snippet of an example put method, right? And the next thing you need to do is like get data from the network. Here's how this works. Here's a code snippet, right? And then at the bottom of that, we can have like our detailed like function signature documentation. And then you can say, and here's a hello world example for vanilla JavaScript front end, and here's a hello world for vanilla Node.js, and like links to those in the repo. So, and this would be like the top level README when somebody comes into the repo. And so the intent here is, I'm a JavaScript developer. I'm like a very new, or I don't want to say new, but like a beginner, or like not an experienced JavaScript developer, kind of like your average front end JavaScript developer. I come in and I look at this, and I should be able to read this documentation and be able to get to a hello world just from this documentation. Like I should be able to reproduce these steps and kind of have an abstract notion that, okay, this is like kind of an abstract database or object storage API, and I know that it's doing something with distributed storage, but that's about it. And I should be able to replicate that. And then what we're going to want to do is literally just like do almost like a user interview with a developer, where we like, and I have like lots of people who've been asking me about this. Like I have probably a dozen people in the backlog where I'm just literally going to send them a link, like an email, send them a link to the repo, be like, here you go, play with it, tell us what you think. And they're going to email me back and be like, I have no clue how this works, I'm so confused. Or like, oh, this was really easy. Or like, well, I think you should do it this way. Like we're looking for sort of feedback from people at this point. And I'm sure we all have friends or people we know that we could ask the same thing. Maybe we could even demo some of them in person. But that's kind of that's what I think the next step would be here, is to get feedback and to kind of set this up in a way that people can sort of like self onboard themselves into it and try to figure it out.
Yeah, we need that the repository got this feeling of that any developer wants. You want to get in the repository, clone it, and run the README, and this is working, right? That's the idea. Yeah, I will work on that. Got it noted, actually.
Great. Yeah, and just keep in mind that in terms of like the complexity, we still want to keep it as simple as possible. Like it's almost like stupid simple at this point. We've got a lot of great ideas of how we want to extend it, how we want to improve it. We're just going to put that on hold for now until we start getting some feedback from people, some like very basic feedback on which direction this could go.
Sure. This documentation, at least in the README example, should at least point to run your own nodes, like your localhost nodes.
I think that would be a lot of work for people to like compile and set up. We can probably just point them to our public test RPC test endpoints, especially since we have these all puts free for now.
Mm-hmm.
That would be much easier for them to get started.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think we want to have like a default variables for the config that already include like the farmer WebSocket address and the client WebSocket address. No.
I don't like it. Like, just give an example. Like these are the test net. You can connect here.
Just copy and paste.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
there is
Yeah,
less
like
magic. Is
instruction
where
to
does
create
it connect?
the
Where does it store it? Like it's
Something like
magical.
That's what front end developers want. Trust me, I've talked to many of them. They want the magic API.
Okay.
They want you to magically solve all their problems for them. They just want their application to run. They don't care
No, I
about
want that.
how it
I want
works.
that too. Don't get me wrong, but
Okay, we'll make it explicit. We'll just put it in the hello world for now, but in a way that they can just copy and paste it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to share like a quick story here. So I got the chance when we got this grant from the National Science Foundation to start doing research on Subspace. The first thing we actually had to do before we were even allowed to start doing actual research or development is we had to go out and do 30 customer interviews, like 1 hour long customer interviews with potential users. So I spent almost 3 weeks just interviewing developers, front-end developers mainly, front-end JavaScript developers, and also a lot of back-end developers about decentralized storage and database APIs and things like this. Some of them were protocol engineers, some of them were like DApp developers, some of them were just traditional software engineers. So kind of a whole range of people. And in that, I got a chance to interview one of the first employees or co-founders, I can't remember, at Firebase. And at the time, Firebase was kind of what we were using as the model for what we wanted to like build. We were like, we're going to be a decentralized Firebase. The interview I had with this guy was really interesting. And I was explaining to him how we had this great API, and he was like, you're wasting your time. Like, stop, just stop. Go talk to users and show them the API. He was like, he said they went through something like 17 iterations of Firebase. And they actually hired a developer user researcher to go out and do these interviews. And they went to like lots of hackathons and like gave it, like literally they would like go to a hackathon and like show it to somebody and like try to explain it to them in 5 minutes. And then that person would go build an app on top of this API that they built. And they iterated so heavily on this API, and the final product was like night and day different from what they started with the way that they thought about how they should do this. So the point of the story is that like whatever we design is probably not what people like will not make sense to other people, because we have like, we know everything about how this works. We have all these like preconceived notions about how it will work, how it should work. And they're probably not like, they're probably completely different from the people who are building this and the people that are going to be using this to build things. And the things that people will build are probably, we can't even imagine what they're going to build. Like we have like, oh, it's going to be for NFTs, or it's going to be for like blockchain storage, because that's what we're using it for. But other people could use it for something completely different, and that's great, and that's wonderful. But the point is, we really just want to get people's feedback and ideas before we really design this. Like the back end, we can't really change that much, right? That's pretty much set. But like the interfaces to this thing in the front end, we have a lot of flexibility. There's like 100, maybe 1,000 different ways that we could do this. And we just need to be very like agile and like customer focused when we think about this here.
Sure. And do we have a plan to do that? To do something similar? To start talking with people and see and how to get their feedback and everything?
We do not have a structured formal plan right now. No, but we are, yeah, I mean, we're just gonna, we're gonna do it very, very lightly right now. But let's get to the point that we've got that API. Let's get it to the point that we can discuss, you know, that we can actually share it with people, and then we'll discuss how we'll do that. But I think that's gonna be happening soon. It's a good question.
Got it.
Okay. Any other thoughts or feedback on Subspace.js?
We need to make a change in the farmer for the test environments. I think we talked about this yesterday. We need to expose the farmer RPC, and I don't know if Justin had made some changes yesterday.
I would imagine not yet.
Yeah, I will do the changes if Justin haven't already.
Just coordinate with Justin so you don't duplicate the work.
Yeah, sure. I will ask first.
What needs to change?
So basically, right now we just have a domain name, and that domain name has WebSocket endpoint. We discussed that we probably want to have /ws for WebSocket API for Node. Then we want to have /http for HTTP API to Node, and maybe /farmer to the farmer. So you can like connect to the farmer on the testnet to retrieve objects. Otherwise, we don't have farmer to talk to for gets.
But we can still talk to it just through the whatever the actual IP and port is.
No, it's not exposed at all right now.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No.
So it's not mapped through Nginx.
Yeah, like I'm not sure that the version of the farmer on test. I don't think on test B it even has the version of the farmer which supports this. On test 8 probably does, but it's not exposed. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, that's something we need to do before we start sharing it with other people. But in the meantime, we can just run a node locally for testing and development purposes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not really a blocker, but it's good to know. Okay. Cool. All right. Is there anything we need to discuss about Polkadot.js or the Relayer front end, Leo?
No. I wanted to close these demos today and have a push in the repository, and maybe tomorrow we'll start working in several pending things in the Polkadot apps. If we don't have any important update to do to the library, but I think that I will have to make some extra work in this documentation to have a well-structured repository. And yeah, I think that between today and tomorrow we can have this like publish it.
Great. And don't overthink the documentation. Like, we don't want it to be too long, because then that'll be sort of overwhelming to people. So like 1 page, you know, like less than 5 minutes, maybe like 2 minutes to read it. Like try to keep it as simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What have you got for? You said there's some pending tasks for Polkadot.js and the Relay front end. What have you got lined up for that, or what would the next steps be?
Yeah, Nazar pointed me out this problem with the block authoring front end. Yeah, I have to make a fix in there to actually show the real identity. It is not showing the real identity thing in the Polkadot Explorer, and I think that's the most priority. Yeah, and the second one is the block time update in the front end. And after that, we have to discuss the progress component that it doesn't allow to us to show the progress of the current era, because it's like hard coded in the Polkadot dots. Like they request for aid, they request for Aura, but we are exposing this in the Subspace module. And yeah, that's those are the three pending tasks in the Polkadot Explorer.
Okay, got it. And there's nothing in the backlog for Relay front end. That's all caught up.
Yeah, there are 2 updates, pending updates, but they are not like critical. One is to sort the parachains for the block number and show the subspace hash, and that I think that is important. But right now, I don't know what's the priority of that.
Okay, yeah, the priority right now would be finish the documentation, get the first version of Subspace.js published, so that we can start kind of playing with that internally, and maybe sharing it with some people. And the second thing actually would be to just go ahead and close out the relayer. Let's just get those two final features done, since that's, I think, more people, many more people are looking at the relayer front end than are looking at our testnet through Polkadot.js right now. And then the next step would be to fix these rendering issues that we have for the different constants or whatever within our protocol on Polkadot.js.
Yeah, I will follow that.
Okay, great. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that's all everything to cover.
Okay. Nazar, Serge, any other questions or comments?
No, I think looks good.
Awesome. Okay, cool. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. And next week we'll have more updates on the front end. Hopefully, those of you that are watching might get to play with Subspace.js as well.